Hi all, it's Sue Cook here, and I know that I often talk about neurodevelopment and brains and all of that. I'm also a homeopath of 29 years, and I thought maybe I'd talk to you about some first aid remedies. I find the first aid remedies really useful. One of the reasons for that is because I always look for what the shock or the trauma was when I'm dealing with patients, and because first aid remedies deal with a lot of shock, so it's a really good idea to have a very good handle on these remedies. And then when the people around us are going through stuff, you can see, oh, they're in this state, or oh, they're, and then you can help them with your own first aid kit, or if you've got specific remedies, then you can use those. So I'm using my covered version of the Synoptic Materia Medica. I think this one's by Vermeulen. Let me double check that for you. Yeah, Franz Vermeulen, and I love this book. It's the easiest Materia Medica to use. I've also got my Fatac as well, Materia Medica, very easy, and they're laid out really well so that you can see what you want to look at. I'm going to begin with Aconite. Now, Aconite, when you go into an Aconite state, if you think about the plant, which is Aconitum napellus or monkseed, it's extremely poisonous, not in homeopathic form, so don't panic. But if you happen to have been poisoned by Aconite, you will get extremely anxious, and you'll know you're going to die because it's such a terrible poison. And so because we treat like with homeopathy, if somebody just thinks they're going to die, or they've had an accident and something like that, and they just thought they were going to die at one point, they can go into an aconite state, and that is a horrible state of shock where they're extremely restless, fear of death with tossing. I'm reading, that's why I'm looking down. They can have panic attacks, unaccountable fear and palpitations, tingling sensations on their extremities. It might be after a car accident, a strong fright, or being stuck in an elevator, or something that's just freaked them out. And they can't calm down, and they do think they're going to die. They don't like being in a crowd either, and they can seem extremely anxious. And it can also be the after effects of a shock, such as I have described. And it can be ailments from wind as well. Wind can set them off, and it can come on suddenly. So that's the mind symptoms of aconite, just so you know. And it's also in little children, we would use it a lot for fevers. But I'm just going to stick with the mind symptoms there, and I'm going to flick through to Arnica, and I will find it at some point, because Arnica is a great remedy. It's the most famous first aid remedy we've got, and everybody knows it. And if I find it, so many remedies in this book, thought I was there. Okay, so Arnica is the #1 first aid remedy. It's the most famous one. It's the one everybody knows. And Arnica comes from the mountain daisy. So if you imagine all the little goats up in the mountain, whenever they tripped and bashed their ankle or fell over, they would come back and they would find some mountain daisy, some Arnica, and it would help their joints and their injuries recover. So they would nibble it. And animals are very good at that. That's something that we have not necessarily been so good at as humans, or at least we don't realise necessarily when we are, and we crave something that we actually need. But that's your mountain daisy. It's very famous for bruises. So if we look at what it says in the book, ailments from injuries, bruises, shock, jar, overexertion, sprains, touch, motion, and it's better from lying down, open air, cold bathing, sitting up. And they might, if you've had an Arnica type shock, you might just wake up from your sleep with a frightful dream after an accident or an injury. So you're awake in terror and you're back there at whatever triggered you. Patients who are fearful, but the fear remains at night after an accident. And also it's patients who might worry and exaggerate trivial symptoms, and ailments from injuries. So of the soft parts, mental trauma, grief, remorse, financial loss, fright, so any shock that deals with any of that. And the whole body can be oversensitive, so they want to be left alone. Now this is one of the absolute pictures for you. So if you can imagine that you've just seen somebody either get injured or witness something horrible, and they go, don't come near me, I'm fine. that is a classic Arnica state. So they hurt so much all over that they don't want anyone coming near them. And that's when you know they need a little bit of Arnica. But getting it to them might be another story, unless they're used to homeopathy. You go, just a little pill, you'll be all right. And they don't want anyone touching them. Bruised, sore everywhere, hemorrhagic tendencies, bruising easily, and all of that. So there's your Arnica. And what else have we got? Arsenicum is one of my favourites. I love Arsenicum. It's a homeopathic arsenic. And again, it's quite a good shock remedy, or if you're worried about your driving test, or worried about getting on a plane, or you're anxious before an exam, or you've got to do something and you just can't, and you fall apart a little bit. That's your Arsenicum. So what it says in the book: insecurity, afraid to be alone, constant desire for company, many fears, disease, cancer, robbers, poverty, death, being alone, and just completely preoccupied with death as well. And they can be absolutely fastidious, censorious, and they often look very good. So they have an immaculate outer appearance. And they always quite elegant people, obsessed with order and tidiness, and very, very restless, very, very anguishy, very, very anxiety if something's expected of them, anxiety about health, exaggerated symptoms to assure attention, and dependency on other people, and burning pains. Lots and lots of symptoms there. Unquenchable thirst for cold water. But I like to concentrate on the mind symptoms because that's what helps you. If you think back a couple of 100 years to before we had homeopathy, and when we just had raw materials, so say arsenic was being used as a medicine or a poison. So if you got poisoned by arsenic, you would know you'd been poisoned again, and you would be vomiting like mad, and you might be pooping as well at the same time. So that's a particular characteristic. And your head would be hot, so you want fresh air, but your body might be cold and you might be shaking. So imagine the picture of sitting by an open window with a duvet around you, you know, like that. And so as you can see from just those symptoms, that Arsenicum is the #1 remedy for food poisoning. And you would then follow it up when the vomiting and stuff has calmed down, but you've got tummy ache and you feel awful and your stomach hurts. That would be when you give the Nox Vom. And then after that, for the 3rd stage, when you have a lot of dehydration from fluids, that's when you would give China. Now, China is an interesting one. I know I'm going slightly off a tangent here. China is quinine, or the cinchona bark, and it was the first ever homeopathic drug test, or proving as we call them. And if you think back a few hundred years again, quinine would have been used for malaria. And the reason is because China, or cinchona bark, if you take it, will give you intermittent fevers. So you get the same symptoms that malaria has when you take it, and that's why it cures it, because like cures like. Interesting. So what have we got? What have we got coming up next on first aid remedies? Oh, belladonna. Belladonna. So this is poison again, deadly nightshade. And once again, obviously, don't take this in material form. Don't take it from the garden. The only time it's ever safe to take is in a homeopathic potency prescribed by a homeopath, or safely from one of your first aid kits. Don't go using the raw plant in the garden. Same goes for aconite. Extremely poisonous, so I am not advocating that. Only in homeopathic dilution. So belladonna. I remember once I was driving along as a passenger actually, and it was a sunny day, and we were driving through trees, and it was light shade, light shade, light shade on my eyes. And when we got to the other end, I had this like really banging, throbby head, and a belladonna soon sorted that out. So one of the keynotes of belladonna is banging, throbbing pain in the head. So let's see what it says in the book. So persons who react intensely to occurrences or situations, who are lively and entertaining when well, but violent and delirious when sick. So the angel and the devil. Violent mental symptoms. Patient becomes extremely strong and frightening. Hallucinations, go into delirium during fevers. So you can imagine that if you're a little child and you've got this terrible fever and you're seeing things, that's what this is talking about. And the desire to strike, bite, kick and pull hair. So because of the frightening hallucinations they get, they can lash out. They don't mean to, they don't know they're doing it, but that's just because they've got these visual disturbances and fever and stuff. Yes. So ailments, rush of blood to the head, heat, redness, burning, dilated, shining pupils. So if you're thinking about belladonna and deadly nightshade, the reason it's called belladonna, beautiful lady, is because the pupils would dilate. And so women used to take atropine, which is the active component from belladonna, to make their pupils dilate and make them look beautiful, because it's a sign of kind of like being turned on, isn't it? Pupils go big. And so it was seen as being an attractive thing. So yeah, if your child has got these dilated pupils, and it could be that they need belladonna for their fever or whatever they've got. Oh, one of my favorites, Bellis perennis. So Bellis, beautiful, perennis, perennial, beautiful perennial. This is the common daisy. And if we think about what happens to the daisy, so the daisy is just sitting there in the grass looking all fabulous with its big smiley face, you know, its little yellow here and white around the edge. And then you walk across it and it just bounces back. And that's what it does. It's the arnica of the soft tissues. So if you've taken arnica and it's not quite done its business, then maybe a different type of daisy would help, and that would be Bellis perennis. So it's good if you get whacked in the boob, which happened to me once, and my boob was a bit sore. Took a Bellis perennis, sorted it out. So the book says bruised soreness, sometimes better for motion and better for rubbing. And we have deep trauma or septic wounds, especially in the abdomen or pelvis. Injury when swelling remains after treatment with arnica. A railway spine, so recent and remote effects of blows, falls, accidents, straining of the back. And persons who have done much hard physical work and travelled much. Falls on the coccyx. Inability to walk during pregnancy. Oh yeah, this is funny enough, I was talking to someone about that this morning. From straining or abdominal muscles or internal bruising of the uterus by kicking. Yeah, so if you're struggling a bit, Bellis is good for that when you're pregnant. Bearing down labour-like pains after parturition, that means giving birth. Indigestion, stomach complaints after sudden chilling of the stomach, i.e. on a hot day when you've had ice cream. And also, yeah, hardness in the boob after being punched in the boob. That was from karate. Yep, that sorted that out, no problem. What else am I going to find in my book that's useful? Calc. Oh my goodness, all the calcs. Calendula. Let's do calendula. Calendula is marigold, and it's an absolutely phenomenal little remedy. I used to have the tincture. I don't think I've got any at the moment. So the tincture is like the extraction from the plant. So they get the plant, mush it up with alcohol for however long, you extract that, and that's called a tincture. So it's not diluted homeopathically at all. And some years ago, probably 30 years ago, I cut this finger here like that. What I was doing is I was sawing a branch off a tree, and the saw bounced out of the tree and just went into my finger here, cut this huge gaping thing. So I rushed in the house and I put, I diluted some calendula tincture, wrapped it up, put it on it, and I kid you not, sometime later there was nothing to see. I was absolutely mind blown by that. And during the First World War, when soldiers used to come in with skin injuries from having been harmed at war, what the nurses used to do back then, this is before antibiotics, what they would do is they pour calendula tincture, diluted obviously, over the wound, and then they would wrap it all up with bandages, and they would never take the bandages off. They would just keep on pouring and keeping the wounds wet with the calendula tincture until the bandages fell off, and the injuries would heal without scarring. Now, calendula is going to kill germs, as you can tell. So it saved more lives than anything during the First World War. So let's see what my book says. So soft parts, excessively painful, open, torn, cut, lacerated, ragged or suppurating wounds. Suppurating means pus making. It prevents pus, defective closure of surgical wounds. So if you've had surgery and you're not healing, open wounds with threatening infection, profuse discharge of pus after forceps delivery, sensitive to damp and open air, exhaustion from loss of blood and excessive pain, great disposition to take cold. Cold, that was not hold. It's great disposition to take cold, so to catch colds, as it were. Particularly useful in dressing torn or cut wounds, the parts being kept wet constantly with a weak solution For concomitant symptoms, administer calendula internally. Yeah, so like I said, you'd put the tincture on your skin. You could also take it as a homeopathic remedy and it would heal you from the inside. It's great for superficial burns and scalds, ulcers, irritable ulcers that are inflamed, sloughing, that means like everything's coming off it, varicose, painful, as if beaten, and excessive secretion of pus, hemorrhages in scalp wounds or after extraction of teeth, and jaundice with curdy stools. That sounds charming. Bed sores, prevents cicatrices and keloid tissue. So in other words, if you've got skin breakages, the calendula will heal that. And it also says heartburn and goose flesh all over the body. I've never used it for that. Interesting, but there's always more to learn. What have we got for you here? Just want to give you suitable first aid remedies and not get it too complicated. Here's China. So I briefly alluded to that earlier when I was talking about the 3 remedies that you use for food poisoning. So you would use the Arsenicum, then the Nux Vom, and then you'd finish up with China. So more about China here. Loss of fluids, worse touch, worse jar, so they don't like being poked periodically, better from hard pressure, better from loosening the clothing, better from bending double, and better from fasting. So if it's partially similar to Nux Vom, Lycopodium, Chelidonium and Nat-Mure, with only temporary or partial improvements after those remedies. So if you've given Nux Vom or Lycopodium or Chelidonium, Nat-Mure, and the patient hasn't got better, then you can, China's often a good bet. It's for very artistic people who like beautiful colours, they feel the colours, they make verses, they're painters, strong sense of beauty, reserved disposition generally, express themselves in writing, poems, painting, find it difficult or impossible to express their feelings in ordinary words, only talk about themselves with confident persons and good friends. So they don't like superficial contact, they much prefer deep. So desire to have the best things. Their minds are full of plans and ideas, especially in the evening and at night, clarity of mind in the evening, sleeplessness from activity of the mind. But they have this delusion that they're unfortunate in a hostile world. Yeah, so and they can have canine hunger at night, and also gallstones every hour. Obviously, I'm nitpicking out symptoms because I'm just not reading you everything. I want to keep it very light and first aidy. What are we going to go to next? Let's find you something. See, they're all around the ABC area, and when you go further into the book, there are less first aid remedies. It's funny that, isn't it? And oh, Drosera. Yeah, we could do Drosera. Why not? Drosera is the sundew. So this is a little carnivorous plant. You've probably seen it. I think it's the one with the sticky, you know, anyway. So this is really good for the respiratory organs. I remember one time when my kids were at primary school, there was a whooping cough thing going around, and everyone was coming up to me asking me for this remedy. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I was having to turn up to school with all these packets of Drosera for all these mums because they'd heard that it was helping some of the other ones. So yeah, I had a queue, and it helped. It's a really quick fix. It certainly helped my kids really quickly. Preeminently considered a cough remedy, especially whooping cough. Drosera has, however, probably more to offer. The marked tubercular symptomology suggests that the remedy should be useful in treating children with behavioural problems of anxious or peevish or mistrustful persons. So that was just a little note there, which is more constitutional than first aid. These people who need this remedy can be restless, have it difficult to concentrate when reading, could not stick to one subject. They can be full of mistrust. They can be very anxious when alone, fear of ghosts. They can be quite obstinate, yeah, and growing pains. The 3 drugs one has seen dealing successfully with scar tissue are Graphites, Silica and Drosera. Where the tuberculosis scars are concerned, the greatest is Drosera. Well, that's an interesting note because that's not one you'd necessarily think of for scar tissue. How many homeopaths of our day read Hahnemann's Materia Medica Pura? But I may tell you that Hahnemann gives bold type to only the laryngeal problems, but he gives this also to joints, shoulder, hip, and again to the ankle. One should certainly think of Drosera for asthma with a tubercular history. Stiffness and inflexibility of the ankles, violent spasmodic cough, barking and hollow. So that's where I'm going to leave this little first aid talk today. So some of those are tinctures that you would apply to the skin and some of them are pills you take. I hope that's useful. I'll see you in the next video.